Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about seniors and expectations. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, what's your expectation on a senior software developer? I hear that I'd heard that the expectation by a few engineering managers that a senior's job is not just about delivering the implementation and provide technical mentorship to juniors. A senior software developer is also supposed to be fully accountable for the team's collective output. I struggle on this whenever there's an underproductive team member who is unable to pick up the pace despite guidance and mentoring. Well, I would say that I define this a little bit differently from the engineering managers that you were talking about. But the first things first, guys. So this is the thing that can be a little bit tricky when it comes to defining, senior versus mid-level versus. We all have various ideas of what you're supposed to know, and as I've said on many occasions, it's really, really tricky to just set like a super clear term and say you are a front-end developer if you know exactly this stuff. You are a back-end developer if you know exactly that stuff, and you're a senior if you know exactly this stuff and you do exactly this stuff, because it varies from person to person, and the engineering manager usually has a span of what they consider to be senior and not senior. I mean, I've been in conversations, guys, with like potential employers and so forth, where their definition for senior is one thing, and then in the next company it's a different thing, and so forth. So it really comes down to the manager in question. So what I'm going to give you is the way that I think about seniority and the sort of expectations that I put, but I also want you to understand that my definition may not be the one that you're going to see out in your company or wherever you're working, and you might not even agree with me, but it's the one that I usually apply. So to each his own, to a certain degree at the very least. But the thing that I usually ask for when I hire seniors is that, first and foremost, I argue that a real senior, or someone who is has seniority, is what I refer to as an insurance policy. In other words, if I know, and I don't care how much they know or like whatever how they define themselves, the whole goal with hiring that person is that if I put them in the project, they will be able to get productive fairly quickly without a lot of assistance. I mean, everybody needs assistance. I mean, myself included, right? To get accesses and all that stuff. But they should know their tools and their whatever they're specializing in, to a point where I shouldn't worry that they don't know what they're doing, or that they're going to produce like shitty code or anything like that. That should be a non-issue for me, because that's the sort of stuff that you worry about when you're hiring a junior and potentially up to a mid-level. I'm very sad to say that it also happens up to the senior level, and that's why I don't like the term senior, because I don't care how many years you have worked, which is the bar we set today. I care about output, and output means that you know how to test your code, you know how to like structure a basic workflow, and you know how to deliver, and so forth and so forth. I should have no real need to guide you on the basics of how the industry does work in large scale development and stuff like that, because you've done this journey more than a few times. And then on top of that, because that is the bare minimum, like if I had to pick like between someone who's really, really sociable or so, like this is where it gets tricky, right? Because the thing that matters most after establishing that part is there is, okay, to what degree do we need this individual to have strong soft skills? Because you can always argue for that, well, your soft skills are more important, and I kind of go, well, if that was true, then why would we hire a senior software developer? Then we should hire an engineering manager or some person who's just really, really nice. Because if there's no, if we forget about the fact that they need to write software really, really well, because that is at the end of the day what's going to bring value. And I'm sorry to say this, and I have given guidance on a few occasions to more junior experiences or so forth and so forth, where they've been put in a situation where they have dealt with a senior who I jokingly refer to the bitter old senior, right? they know their job, they're doing it, really, really nice. The customers are happy with the system, they deal with everything and so forth, but they don't really have any soft skills, and they don't mentor, they don't do all this sort of stuff, right? And as a company or as an employer in that sort of situation, you're going to have to make a way of it. Is it better to replace the senior or try to coach them, like assuming now of course that they are coachable, or is it better to just move the junior to a different sort of team? And that is the thing that I argue for whenever you hire for anybody for anything. It's like a football team. If I have a system that needs to, like, which has a certain level of complexity, or you have certain dynamics within that team where they are being productive, although you may not love everything that they are doing, if they're producing the output, does it need fixing? It's the same thing when we do with code and so forth and so forth. It's the rule we have: don't break it if it works, or don't fix it if it works, or don't change it if it works, and so forth. Same deal with humans, if you ask me, at the very least. And so I've said that to the people in question. Maybe you should consider to be in a different team where you might have a senior with higher levels of social skills. But on average, that is something that I look at. So once it comes down to, okay, this senior is either going to be in a feature factory type of like team where everybody else is sort of mid-level senior plus or something like that, where it's great if they're really sociable and nice. We try to go for that, but if we have to really pick, because unfortunately we can't just always say that everybody's going to be perfect for everything, we have to sort of figure out strengths and weaknesses, then that is the first thing I think about. Will they be able to like seamlessly blend in? Because the thing I really like, a deal breaker for me, is when they call it friction. So if you put a better old senior in a team with, say, a lot of junior experiences, or people who are on average very sociable and may actually need some mentoring and stuff like that, that's usually not something that I would consider, because the dynamics of the team forces me to consider more the social aspects. And in those sorts of situations, it becomes tricky for you to hire and so forth, because you might have to like sort of just accept that you're not going to be able to, for example, make everybody happy with mentoring and stuff like that with this person, or you might have to accept that their coding skill is a little bit weaker than you would have liked, but they're a really nice person and they would bring a lot of benefit and growth to the other developers in the team. The only time though, which I think is a little bit funny, like, because if you consider what your engineer manager is saying about, all right, the total output, like the collective output of the team, if that is the senior's responsibility, well, that would be great. Usually I don't do that, because I've seen so many times that the average software developer or the average senior, leadership and stuff like that, I wouldn't go as far as to say that is something that should be in scope for, what's the difference between a senior and a junior? Well, as I said, technical skills should be one thing, but I think that when we're getting into the realm of you are now leading the team and so forth, then I prefer to use a different term. In many cases it is the same thing, it's a senior is doing the job, and that is tech lead. Now, as a tech lead, because of semantics here, that's when I start saying that, okay, so if you're more or less a little bit, even if you're just a senior in the team, but if you are in some way the person who more or less is main go-to for the stakeholders, main person who facilitates rituals, agile stuff and so forth, so you are the go-to, like the unofficial leader, or if you are the tech lead, then yes, then I would put some expectations on that person in terms of the collective output. But I would never go and say you are at fault because someone is unproductive in your team, unless I can clearly see that is the case. So how do I figure that out? Well, it's easy, because I talk to the tech leads that I work with. Because these days, I have become so old and so gray that now the tech leads answer to me as well. So when I talk to them, I basically tell them that here are some tips and guidelines for, you make sure that you keep your packages updated, make sure that you have some basic structure about like how you divide work on like a Kanban board or something. Make sure that you have like a getting started guide or something, so that when you're going to start, when you want to set up the system locally, you have some documentation for that and so forth. And then you should check testing and all that stuff, right? So these are the expectations that me as the representative of the company will put on the tech lead. Now, their job is to make sure that happens. In other words, they are supposed to make sure that everybody in the team, and that the team has like a clear understanding of what expectation do we put on the development process? What do we want you to do? What types of testing? What types of quality checks and rituals and stuff like that? And they will own that part. And as long as they are doing that part, then everything's good. Because frankly speaking, it's impossible to just always say that regardless of how unproductive an individual is, it's just everybody else's responsibility to raise them up. That is something we will try to do, but at some point you sort of have to accept that there's a mismatch here. And I wouldn't fault the senior for that or the tech lead, because as long as they come and tell me that, yeah, this person is a little bit underperforming and so forth, then we're being transparent about the thing, and they've done everything that we can reasonably ask of them, because I mean they're human as well. They can't just fix stuff if they can't, and then we try to address it as like an individual level. But I won't hold the tech lead responsible for that someone simply isn't fit to or someone isn't capable enough to be in the team. So what I want you to take away from this is that seniority is a notoriously difficult thing to define, and every engineering manager you meet is going to have their own vague definition of what it means, and so you sort of just have to roll with the punches here, guys, and accept that on average the only thing you can truly say is that a senior person is usually the most experienced person in the team, or one of them, and it's, by my definition, should be an individual who there are no concerns. You pay them extra, you pay them the higher salaries in the software team due to this exact thing. They should be able to produce without issue. They should know all the rituals and all the basic jargon and stuff like that. I shouldn't have to teach them how to do the job, apart from, of course, giving them accesses to like this basic stuff, right? But they should be an experienced person who can handle most things. And then depending on what type of composition the team has, we will put higher requirements or lower requirements on social skills, because soft skills and social skills and so forth are more important if you're dealing with, especially if you're dealing with a lot of stakeholders, or if you're dealing with like juniors and stuff like that, because then you have to be more sociable in order to make that environment productive. However, if you're in a feature factor type of deal where everybody's super experienced and so forth, we may not need to have as higher requirements on soft skills. But on the other hand, if you're a tech lead or something where you're basically leading the team, then we will put basic requirements on that individual for making sure that good practices are followed, that the team are making sure that they're following rituals and updating packages and doing security checks and all that sort of stuff. That's because it's a leadership role, right? But making that individual completely responsible for the collective output is unreasonable, I argue. They can only do so much, and then of course if there's still someone after all that, if the majority of people are doing everything well and so forth, there maybe is one or two people in the team that seem to just struggle with the environment, although everything else is working, then I mean it wouldn't be fair to the tech lead to say, hey, you are responsible for fixing that. That is a different conversation. Have a great day.